Welcome back, Barrett, Sallee, and John Michaels. It's the Fans College Football Podcast. Of course, you can hear both of us on 680 The Fan in Atlanta. Mr. Michaels, how are you this fine morning?
Well, Billy Napier's about to get fired thanks to my Miami Hurricanes, who put a whooping on him. I was down there, had a great time, got the tailgate. I watched Mario Cristobal do what he does best, and that's pound team into submission.
Yeah, it was bad. It was really bad if you're a Florida Gator fan. Although for you as a Miami fan, I'd kind of want Billy Napier to stick around. Maybe you shouldn't have gotten an extra touchdown. Give Florida fans hope that Billy Napier could get things turned around. But I digress. What I want to kick things off about last week, Auburn got absolutely screwed. That no call was egregious. The referees just handed Oklahoma a touchdown. Here, take it. Here's your touchdown. And what really bothers me is the backlash from the Oklahoma side or the fans who say, well, it didn't matter because you had all these other chances to win the game. No kidding. We know that. That is surface level analysis that children make, because if you do not get a free touchdown, the entire game changes. Now, it might have turned out the same, but the entire game changes. Plans change, personnel change, ideas change, philosophy changes. Everything changes because of one free touchdown. I'm not saying that Auburn would have won the game. They don't block. That was problematic throughout the course of the game. But getting handed a touchdown when it is clear as day what happened, the guy was right next to an official, is absolutely ridiculous. And I put on X after that game that this is something that should be considered in the conversation for the college football playoff. I'm not saying Auburn's going to get there. I'm not saying Oklahoma's going to get there. I'm not saying there's going to be a conversation between both of those teams at the same time. But if there is a conversation about Oklahoma and or Auburn, that is something that needs to be discussed. They move the goalposts all the time in that committee room. This is something that was bad for our sport, bad for Auburn, bad for officials, and I would even say bad for Oklahoma, because moving forward, this is going to be a stain on their record, whether they like it or not.
It's funny you say that, because we had that same argument a year ago when it came to LSU and South Carolina. Remember, South Carolina has a pick six. They have the egregious personal foul penalty on a crackback block on Garrett Nussmeier, who wasn't even in the play. It ultimately ends up costing South Carolina a victory. They ultimately don't even win the game. They end up with 3 losses. You know how they end up out of the postseason? Because of that play. So it's something that could happen. And it's funny because I went back. I was at a tailgate. I didn't get to see it live. I obviously went back and watched a lot of highlights from what happened over the weekend. And that was something we used to do in flag football. I'm not kidding you. We had a play. I don't remember what we called it, but we'd do the same thing where we'd have people act like they were running off the field and kind of mill around right on the sideline and then sort of step onto the field or be just far enough in where the officials knew they were there, but a lot of times the opposing team didn't have that. Matt Austin, who was on the call, is the official that they were talking to during the broadcast. He literally said that should have been a 15-yard penalty, because it kind of was like the substitution. You're not allowed to be deceptive with the substitution, and it felt like that player was being deceptive. Auburn never knew he was there. They had a defensive back lined up over the next closest wide receiver. They had a defensive back lined up over the slot. But again, you give up a long touchdown that ultimately ends up being the difference on the scoreboard of the game. I hate when officiating gets in the way of the game. I thought it changed the Miami-Florida game. Marty Brown had a 45-yard touchdown that they didn't blow the whistle until he broke out of the pile. His momentum never stopped, and it let the Gators get back in the game. But officiating cannot dictate college football games. Unfortunately, Barrett, we see it happen time and time again.
Yeah, and I'm not somebody who piles on. Like, honestly, I've got a good friend who's an official in high school, and I love having conversations with him about what officials are looking at, what a back judge's responsibilities are, what a side judge is responsible, what an umpire is supposed to look at. I love having those conversations because it's interesting to me, because we can sit here and say, oh, that referee missed this or that official missed this. Well, okay, but that's not their responsibility to look at this part of the play or that part of the. I love having those conversations. So generally speaking, I don't necessarily defend officials, but I like to understand if they miss a call, why they missed a call. And in this case, it was just egregious. It did cost Auburn a game, potentially, because play X does not beget play XY, does not beget play Z. So it was unfortunate, and it's a stain on Auburn. It's a stain on Oklahoma, because if that conversation happens in Oklahoma's in the committee room, it's going to be a talking point. It's going to be a data point, whether Oklahoma fans like it or not. Let's get to an underrated game that I don't know if a lot of people watched. Indiana is a juggernaut. I mean, an absolute juggernaut. Mendoza's a great quarterback. In Illinois, I like Brett Bielema, and I think it's great that Illinois has taken, his identity, because they are a hard-nosed, smash-mouth team. But a lot of the questions coming into the season was, who's going to be this year's Indiana? Well, maybe it's Indiana.
Yeah, when you win by 53 points over a top 10 team, and maybe Illinois was overranked, who knows? They probably were. It lets you know you're a star. What they did is they replaced Rourke at quarterback with Francisco Mendoza. We had talked about him last week during the podcast. He makes things go for Indiana. They put a whooping and a statement. And Kirk Cignetti, I think they have Ohio State and one other team. That win, Barrett, is a tight win now that they could use as a data point for them if they end up being an at-large team somewhere to say, hey, our schedule's not as soft as it was a year ago. We won by 50-plus over what you considered a ranked team at the time. And that may propel Indiana to be one of those teams when we talk about again, potentially to make a college football playoff. And they better hope and pray that their boosters have a lot of money, because at the end of this year, everybody is going to be calling for Kirk Cignetti to maybe come be their new head coach.
Yeah, an angry Kirk Cignetti is not somebody that you want to cross, because that man will make it hurt. There's no doubt about that. All right, let's get to this week.
Points, and he's just standing there looking like this. I wish Ricky Morris had those same faces.
Well, that's, I'm sure. I don't even want to go to what happened yesterday in Charlotte. My God. All right, let's go to this week in college football. The Magnolia Bowl, LSU versus Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a 1.5-point favorite. Austin Simmons might be ready. Who knows how healthy he'll be. LSU's got some injury concerns on the offensive skill side set. Garrett Nussmeier hasn't necessarily been a Heisman Trophy contender. That is, I think, a little bit of a concern, because with these wide receivers, he was supposed to be a superstar, not necessarily Joe Burrow, but a guy who's a difference maker. He hasn't really been that quite yet. But Ole Miss's offense against decent competition really hasn't been what I thought either. Now, quarterback injuries have been a part of that. I'm going to take LSU, and I'm going to grab the 1.5 points. I know it's in Oxford, and that's, it's a tough place to play. I've been there. It's awesome. I love Oxford. But I think LSU with Garrett Nussmeier, if you start getting into a quarterback battle, I don't care who it is on Ole Miss, either one of those guys, I'll still take Garrett Nussmeier. I honestly, though, I wouldn't bet this game with your money, because this is the Magnolia Bowl. A lot of crazy things happen in this game. But ultimately, I think it comes down to quarterbacks. And if it's coming down to who I trust more, it would be Garrett Nussmeier. But again, I wouldn't wager on this game at all. There's just too many concerns, too many concerns about who will play, who won't play. And I can't do it.
So the way I look at this, I've already pissed off Florida fans about 3 weeks ago on the podcast when I told them that they couldn't get certain coaches. Their wish list was unrealistic. I pissed off Auburn fans preseason when I said they wish they were Georgia Tech. Now it's time to piss off Ole Miss fans. I figure I'm just going to go around the entire SEC. Here's what I know about Lane Kiffin. Typically, their offense is great against C-level or worse competition. Typically, their offense struggles when they play teams that are going to punch them in the face. What I know about LSU this year, Blake Baker's defense will punch you in the face. They have guys right now that have bad intention. The Weeks brothers, they've got like 7 of them. They're like the Wyatt family, WWE. They've got so many.
The Lockett family at Kansas State.
Right. They're everywhere. They're going to punch Ole Miss in the face. And Austin Simmons coming off injury. He's already thrown 4 interceptions on the year anyway. Lane Kiffin's offense doesn't work against power teams. They'll win 9 or 10 games. They're going to be a nice story. They're going to lose this week. LSU runs the football, punches them in the face, and Ole Miss cowers down like they normally do against better competition.
All right, USC back in the national spotlight. And I think, and I've said this a lot, I think Lincoln Riley is a fraud. I do not think he's an elite coach. I think he's proven that at USC over the last couple of seasons. But I also think that Illinois is a paper tiger because what we saw last week against Indiana is a perfect example of that. So I don't expect a lot of points in this game. Jaden Mayava is a good quarterback. Don't get me wrong. But a difference maker, he is not. Luke Altmaier, a difference maker, he is not. So you look at this line, USC minus 5.5. Okay, I would probably take that if I'm betting on that, but I'm going to attack the under 59.5 for this game at noon with a USC team that's on a 3-hour time difference against an Illinois team that just got smoked, dial-a-scored by Indiana. I don't know how you're talking about essentially a 60-point game, a 30-30 game to hit the over. That is insane to me for all of the reasons I just said. Yeah, so I'll take the under in this one. But again, if I had to pick a side, I'd take USC. But again, I think Lincoln Riley's a fraud. So I don't know if I could trust him. I know I can't trust him in this.
Yeah, knowing last year, USC and pretty much any of the West Coast Big Ten teams other than Oregon, when they traveled east, they typically didn't play all that well. I just don't know psychologically how does Illinois bounce back from what just happened to them. They had a really good game against Duke where they put up 45 points and looked like a legitimate top 10 team. I think that's more an indictment on Manny Diaz and Duke and what they overpaid for Dorian Mensah. I don't think they're very good. I do like USC, though. They've got some young players at the skill positions that have given them explosiveness that they haven't had in a while. Transfer running back from the JUCO level who's really running the ball well for them. I think USC goes across country, gets the win. Get ready for all the hype for USC. Is USC back? Because we hear that every year. They're not back, but they're going to win this game. I'll take the points. I'm afraid of over-unders. I don't know why. I just don't mess with them. And I hate betting on unders because I like to see scoring happen. USC minus the 5.5. I think they're the better team than Illinois.
Yeah, I mean, USC to me is an above-average Big Ten team. And that's fine. That's not why they hired Lincoln Riley. I understand. But if they do win, you're going to see all this hype because Illinois is still ranked. Well, not top 10, but 23rd, whatever. But you're going to hear that as USC backed stuff. And, back to being a competitive Big Ten team. Sure. Beyond that, no. Oregon, Penn State. This is honestly my favorite game of the week. I know Georgia, Alabama. We'll get to that in a second. But Oregon and Penn State, opposite sides of the country. We know what Oregon can do with Dante Moore. I love the rushing attack, even without Noah Whittington. Having a guy like De'Aaron Hill complement Jaden Lamar is really helpful for Dante Moore. They love to play in the good thing about what I love about Dan Lanning is that he's made that team like an SEC team. Big, physical, fast, athletic, up front on both sides of the ball. That makes it very difficult for teams outside of the top tier recruiting teams, the Ohio States, the Alabamas, the Georgias, to really handle what they bring on a game-by-game basis. Penn State's been good recruiting, but they don't have the dudes, they don't have the speed, and they don't have the defensive line depth that I think it's going to take to slow down Dante Moore. It's going to be an awesome atmosphere. I love that atmosphere at night in Penn State. It's one of the best things you'll ever see. But I don't think Penn State's going to be able to keep up. I do think Oregon's going to put up a decent amount of points. I was wrong about Drew Aller last year. I'll readily admit that. But I don't think he's going to be able to keep up in this particular game, in this particular scenario against a team in Oregon that is perfectly matched, not only to beat you up, but also beat you in a shootout. And that's exactly what I think is going to happen. I'm floored that Oregon is an underdog in this game. Take that 3.5, but you won't need it because Oregon's winning it outright.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this, to me, is a coaching mismatch. When I see James Franklin, he's a great coach when it comes to winning like 9 or 10 games, beating up Villanova and FIU and teams like that. Much like I talked about a little bit earlier on, when you get into bigger games, this is where James Franklin typically struggles. Think about it. They make a deep run in the playoffs last year, but who'd they beat? They beat SMU. They lose directly to Notre Dame. So it looks good on paper when you go out and do that, but they didn't win the Big Ten a year ago. They didn't win in the college football playoff outside of SMU, who may or may not should have been there. Oregon's deeper and more talented, and I'll go further. I think Drew Aller is a super average quarterback. There's never, to me, been anything special about him other than he was highly ranked, recruited, and he had a guy in Tyler Warren to throw the football to. He had 0 passes complete to wide receivers in the college football playoff against Notre Dame. I think Oregon's better on the defensive line. Uyunglele, who they have there, those guys can get after the quarterback. I think they're going to take away the run game. They're going to load up and say Singleton and Allen are not going to beat us. And I like what Dante Moore brings. He's living up to the expectations of a quarterback who got to transfer and sit a year. And how important does that become? Oregon puts themselves firmly inside the top 5. They plant themselves as maybe the second best team in the Big Ten, maybe the best team. After this weekend, we may see that. I think Oregon wins. And when we get to our lock of the week, I got a feeling Oregon may come up one more time.
That is what you call a tease. Big one in our neck of the woods, the biggest are basically in college football. And that is, you know what, I would say Oregon, Penn State's a bigger in the world of college football, but one that a lot of us have seen. We've all seen it over and over again. It's mattered in a lot of different ways for a lot of different reasons and at a lot of different locations. And that is Alabama, Georgia, between the hedges in Athens. Georgia is a 3.5 point favorite. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that maybe there's a little lack of trust with Kalen DeBoer in a big game, I think for a good reason. And there's certainly a lack of faith in Kalen DeBoer on the road in big games for legitimate reasons. Now, to me, this comes down to Alabama's offensive line versus Georgia's defensive line. Alabama's offensive line, while having players who are individually talented, has been a train wreck for a half of a decade. And yes, that includes under Nick Saban. I think there's this misnomer that Alabama's defense was always fantastic under Saban. Okay, maybe by numbers, sure. But the defense, but offensive line wise, they did not get after it. They just didn't do it. So to me, that's the matchup I want to watch. Do we trust Ty Simpson with pressure in his face? The answer to me is I don't think so. I'm not 100% sure, so I'm not going to go out here and have a hot take, but I don't think so. Not on the road, not at night, not against this Georgia team. So I will take the under because of that, 53.5. I know you don't like betting unders, but I do. I think it's going to be a 21-17 type game. And so to me, if 3.5 points, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. Never, ever. I don't, because I know Alabama's got Georgia's number. I know it. We've seen it. But I do think it's going to be a low-scoring game. If I had to pick a side, it would be Georgia. But I say that like Ron Burgundy. Because you put a question mark at the end. I'm Ron Burgundy? I don't know. But I do think it's going to be a low-scoring game. Watch Alabama's OL versus Georgia's defensive front. What that does to Ty Simpson. Does that cause a few mistakes? I think it will. And you're going to see an old-school, sloppy, ugly game.
I look at this and I go, what is the psyche for the University of Georgia? Because you're talking about 9 out of 10 Alabama's beat them. And I get it. That goes all the way back to the Mark Richt era. That goes all the way back all through the time with Nick Saban. And the only win you and I were both at for the national championship with Georgia was able to take care of business and win their first natty under Kirby Smart. But last year was supposed to be Georgia's, all right, Saban's gone, we take care of business. And Alabama came out and played probably their best offensive game of the year, at least for the first half, when they jumped up 30-7. Does Georgia have a situation where they can get over the Alabama psyche? Now, what I saw with Alabama this year against real competition, not against Wisconsin and Louisiana Monroe, they got punched in the face by Florida State and they never punched back. They kind of cowered and tucked their tails and ran away. And Florida State's not as good as Georgia is. What I saw from Georgia a week ago is when they got punched in the face, or 2 weeks ago, when they got punched in the face by Tennessee, they never flinched. They just kept playing their game and kept fighting and kept coming back. Now, did they get fortunate on a missed kick? Yes, that happens in college football. I think Georgia punches Alabama in the face, and I don't know that Alabama has the punch back. Georgia's got a chance to extend the nation's longest home winning streak. I think the 35 games that they're able to win it this week. I'm not allowed out at Sanford Stadium. You know why, Barrett? The only game I've ever been to in Athens is the last time they lost at home to South Carolina. That was in 2019, and I've had Georgia fans remind me time and time again, don't bring your ass out here, because if we lose, we're going to find you. Georgia punches them in the mouth. They take care of the Alabama bugaboo, and they put themselves squarely in front in the race in the SEC.
All right, let's hit up some coaching topics. I'm going to give you 3 names, and I want one answer for each one. Fired or not fired? Mike Gundy, Luke Fickell, Sam Pittman.
Fired, not fired.
Really? No Sam Pittman?
No, I like what they do on offense. I think he makes it. He may leave on his own, but I don't think he gets fired. The other two are out of there. I thought you were going to throw Billy Napier and Dabo Swinney in the mix as well.
Well, Billy Napier is 100%. Sam Pittman, I'm kind of 50-50 on as well. But you mentioned Dabo Swinney, and that's the one that is so interesting because this is a disaster. This might be last year's version of Florida State. There's no fight. The defense is a train wreck. They got just absolutely destroyed up front by Syracuse, even after Angeli went out. And this is looking like it's going to get worse before it gets better because they're going to try to make Cade Klubnik something that he's not just to try to figure out how to win games. So if you're a regular coach, you might be in trouble, right? But you at least have a resume to fall back on. Dabo does too, but it's a different kind of standard. Right? If you're a 7-5 coach and you have a clunker, okay. But if you're a national championship caliber coach, if you're a playoff semifinal caliber coach, if you're just a 12-team playoff caliber coach, you really can't afford seasons like that, like Florida State from last year. So I think Dabo, to me, he's on a little bit of thinner ice than other coaches would be in similar situations, because if he's not going to live up to that standard, what are they going to do? Like they feel like they have to be at that point right now, and he's not doing it.
Leading into Syracuse, he told all of us, "You want to get rid of me? Fine. I've won 8 out of 10 ACCs," and he's not wrong. They have been the standard in the ACC, and they had built this year to be the champions. You think about it. Last year, they kind of backed their way into the ACC title game. You're welcome, as Miami blew a 21-0 lead against Syracuse and let Clemson get in. They won the ACC. They were competitive for the most part in their playoff loss to Texas. But Dabo, who, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, if kids get paid, I'm leaving. Well, he didn't leave. And he doesn't really want to get in the portal too deep. I know he dabbles, but he doesn't go head first like everybody else because he wants to build his team. He built this team. Cade Klubnik, a senior. Antonio Williams has been there forever. Bryant Westphal, a kid you recruited super high on the outside. Woods and Parker and Woodaz and Sammy Brown and Avion Terrell. They had 11 of the 22 starters on the ACC preseason first team. 11. Everybody bought it hook, line, and sinker. Guess what, Barrett? I picked them to win the national title. This is one of the most epic 4-game failures for a preseason top 5 team ever. And we're talking about Florida State last year, who went 2-10 after being preseason ranked number, 9 or 10 to start the year. Clemson was on most people's short list to win the whole thing, and they're not going to. And it's been a systematic failure. You hired Garrett Riley a few years ago to be an electric offensive coordinator. They're pretty pedestrian on offense. You went and got Tom Allen from Penn State to be your new defensive coordinator. They look like boo-boo on defense right now. And it's not going to get better. You're now kind of out of the ACC race, barring just, what we used to call the wheel of the coastal division, unless you have everybody losing 2 or 3 games. But I look at Georgia Tech, they're not losing 2 games in conference. I don't see Miami losing 2 games in conference. I don't see FSU losing 2 games in conference, which means Clemson's eliminated. What do? You're going to give Dabo another year. They'd never run him out of here unless he wants to leave. And that would be interesting if other chips fell and Dabo says, I've done as much as I can do at Clemson. I think he'll stick around. I think he's still going to be there. But I think the Clemson days of being a national title contender are now done. You're back to being Clemsoning, which was a thing for a long time. You're a 4 or 3 loss type squad. That's your new lot in life.
Yeah, I think Dabo, when he said, I'll just go to the beach, I think that opened the door and let people in to his mindset. And I think it's legitimate. If you don't like me, I will leave. He's done everything. He's built Clemson. He built a dynasty. He built a power. He built a team and a program that was the standard for everybody outside of Alabama, and even maybe those in Alabama when Clemson won 2 of 3. Right. So he has done everything. So I think when he said, I'll just go to the beach, I think he meant it. Maybe not the actual beach. Maybe he's a mountain guy. Maybe he's going to, whatever. But I think it really did, open our eyes to say, like, what the hell else is he going to do? Like, what more do you people want? And honestly, that's a very valid question.
Sure. It's going to be a problem there because, again, all those guys we just talked about, they're leaving to go to the NFL. Now what do you do?
Yeah.
You're watching your competition in the ACC go get guys out of the portal. Florida State's rebuilt through the portal. Miami's a national title contender because they got a portal quarterback. Georgia Tech is a ACC title contender because they got a portal quarterback. I don't know the day of just building through recruiting is ever going to happen again. You have to augment things with the portal and dive deeper than a guy here and a guy.
Agree. Absolutely agree. Even if you're a brand name like Clemson and entered really this portal era as one of the top programs in the country from a sustainability standpoint. So you're 100% right. All right. Bold prediction, lock of the week. I'll go give you both of mine right now. And they're not really that much of a surprise because we did talk about them earlier. Georgia, Bama under 53.5. That is a bold prediction. That is a lock of the week. We'll go with both of those as my bold prediction and lock of the week, because I don't see how this game is going to get beyond, a 40-point game. 53.5 is way too many points. And then we talked about it as well. Lock of the week. In addition, lock of the week number 2, so to speak, Oregon plus 3.5 against Penn State. I don't think Penn State stands much of a chance.
I'm going to go bold prediction number 1. I think Georgia wins by multiple scores against Alabama. I just don't trust Alabama. What I saw against Florida State, I don't know that was an anomaly. It should have been, but you had a guy call you out in the summer, talk trash and say, you're not the same without Saban. And then their team backed it up with no problem whatsoever. I think Georgia does the same this week. My lock of the week is Oregon. Oregon is going to roll Penn State. Penn State does not show up in big games. The Oregon Ducks, Dan Lanning, you talk about that SEC mentality. They go out there and they take care of business. They hush 107,000 people all dressed in white. They might need to wear all black because it might be a Penn State funeral.
There we go. So, all black, the Falcons need to do that for the rest of the season, because that, you know what, we could go about 2 hours on all of that and that nonsense that happened in Carolina. But that's a different story for a different podcast, because this is the Fans College Football Podcast. We appreciate all you guys listening. Subscribe, share the show with everybody. We do this every week. So we'll be back this time next week. And of course, stay tuned to 680 The Fan in Atlanta, Georgia. You can download that app. You can put it in Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. Lots of college football talk, especially this week as Georgia and Alabama square off in Athens. So for here on the Fans College Football Podcast, we'll talk to you next week, but don't forget to download that 680 The Fan app to stay up to date on everything in the college football world going on this week prior to the big matchup in Athens.